Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Livelock. It's a twin stick slash hack and slash. That's a terrible sentence. You're going to have to deal with that for the time being. By a Canadian developer called Tuque, published by Perfect World. Apparently they're getting into the publishing of single player and multiplayer games now as opposed to free-to-plays and MMOs, so that's interesting to see. And in this game, you will play one of 3 very large robot intelligences in a post-apocalyptic world where the humans have been wiped out. There's a little bit of mystery and intrigue as to how that happened and a few interesting characters along the way, but for the most part, you're going to be shooting robots and smashing robots with your robots. Very, very simple concept. Quick look at the options menu will reveal that you've got rebindable keys, which is always nice, including mouse control, and I believe you can actually rebind the controller keys, which is very unusual. You don't see too many games allow you to do that, but this one does, so that's cool. Under video settings, everything that you would expect with the exception of specifics when it comes to video options like lighting and all that kind of thing. I don't know what kind of AA it uses, but you've got a full suite of resolution options. FPS limit, if you wish. Remember, I believe this defaults to 60, even if you happen to be on a monitor that could support more than that, so you might want to turn that up first. Otherwise, you'll be wondering why the game is capped to 60. It's not. It's actually unlimited. Full screen on or off. I believe the full screen is actually borderless window, although I may be mistaken on that. I saw some overlay earlier, which indicated that it wasn't actually in true exclusive full screen. But, you know, it does what it does, and it runs really, really well. At least for me, anyway. I've had no performance problems with it. Master volume, separate volume sliders, and you've got a few gameplay settings here and there. So if you like your damage numbers, you can turn them on or off, which is always good. And you can also change the color of the reticle. That's kind of cute. And display the chat box on or off. So if you really don't want to talk to somebody in the multiplayer, you can turn that off. Nothing particularly special there, but there you go. There is a database as well, which actually includes a lot of information and lore on the various robots that you're attacking, which is cool. You know, they actually put some effort into world building here, even if the setting is fairly generic. There are also audio logs and information about the different weapons that you can use here, as you can see, and they've even added a little bit of lore to that, too. So I appreciate that. You know, that wasn't required, but it indicates to me that the developer actually cares about the world that they created, even if it is somewhat generic. So, without further ado, let's jump into some gameplay. We'll go into multiplayer. The game is a 3-player co-op game, and that is the way that I would recommend you play it, without a doubt. With friends or with randoms, either is fine. It has a quick join mode as well as private games available there as well. So, we're going to jump into some multiplayer and show you exactly how Livelock works. Alright, welcome to Livelock. We're in a multiplayer game at the moment. And I have a giant hammer, as you can probably see. So, this game is essentially a twin-stick shooter, but one of the characters has some fairly significant melee abilities. And by significant melee abilities, I mean he has a giant freaking hammer, or gauntlets, or a few other different weapons besides. The gameplay is pretty much exactly what you would expect. You head on through the level, follow the objective markers, and blow up everything in your path. Or just smash it with a giant hammer, which, again, need to continue pointing out is a pretty good thing indeed. You also have a couple of alternate weapons. In the case of this character right here, I have the giant melee weapon, but I also have this shotgun, or there's something called the Reaper autocannon, which is a weapon that I didn't really like too much, which is why I'm not currently using it. And you'll be able to unlock more weapons as you go through the game. They'll also allow you to upgrade them by using a resource called carbon, which you acquire by killing enemies and also finding these little drops here and there. Now, the upgrades in this game are extremely linear, so you're going to find that once you have acquired a weapon, you'll be able to spend carbon to upgrade it, and that's just going to be a flat-out increase in stats for the weapon, and that thankfully is transparent. It'll let you know exactly what it did in terms of the upgrade, but that is unfortunately about it. I was hoping for the game to have a little bit more of a loot element to it. It almost felt like it should have, because you've got this almost Diablo-esque hack and slash gameplay with a few different abilities. If you're playing the range character, it plays a bit more like a twin-stick shooter, but certainly if you're playing the melee character, I'm definitely getting some barbarian vibes, or vibe barbarians, one or the other, and it's a kind of big dual-wielding hack-and-slash action RPG vibes from it. Understandably so, especially with the different skills that you also have available to use. You even have enemies that have special attributes, such as the ability to poison you or something along those lines. So, yeah, it does feel like kind of game that needs loot. You do get different weapons and upgrades, of course, but they come to you on a level-by-level basis. So, as you level up, you will unlock them, and they will be available for use immediately. You could have also just made the upgrade system more interesting than it is. You know, just instead of being linear damage upgrades, maybe have a couple of different choices as to what kind of upgrades you can grab. Maybe you can apply certain upgrades that are mutually exclusive. Maybe you could add special powers to your weapons. Those are the kind of things that I think would certainly add to the game. But as it stands, since you don't have that, it really does give you that kind of bog standard twin stick vibe. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean the game is bad. Far from it. The game is actually quite enjoyable for what it is. It just immediately makes me think, wow, you know, how much more could this game have actually been if it decided to add a couple of systems like that. Oh, maybe they just wanted to be a little bit more traditional. Maybe they didn't want loot drops to be a big thing. But if you're going to include upgrades in your game, I prefer when you do so in a more interesting fashion as opposed to just straight up linear, this is better now. There's a degree of choice, I suppose, involved in making sure that you upgrade the weapon that you're going to be using the most, certainly, but it doesn't seem like it's really that hard to upgrade a weapon to maximum level. The weapons only have 5 levels each, and as a result, you can quickly upgrade whatever weapon you like to maximum, or at least close to maximum, and it'll be absolutely fine. Just a bit of a missed opportunity, in my opinion. However, let's talk a little bit about the combat, because it's certainly a high point. I have very much enjoyed playing this melee-focused character here. All of the abilities that I have feel like they've got real impact to them. A smaller enemy will be smashed into oblivion, tiny pieces flying all over the screen. The hammer has a lot of weight to it, and its spin ability is extremely enjoyable to use, as far as I'm concerned. You just see, especially smaller enemies, coming to pieces and being smashed all over the place. I have a cool little charge as well, which will often knock abilities out of the way. Knock enemies out of the way, not knock abilities out of the way. That would be a little bit odd. It feels like there's real weight and impact to the attacks, at least as the melee character. The shotgun feels pretty good as well, although I felt that the Reaper autocannon felt somewhat anemic for a weapon that is as large as it is. Outside of that, you have a couple of different abilities which you can swap out, and later on in the game, you also have the choice to upgrade them with a mutually exclusive power. So you can add a special effect to those abilities. That's great. It's just a shame you couldn't do the same thing with the weapons. You'll also notice every now and again I'm getting a special ability called an overclock. You can either collect those or you can trigger them by getting long combo streaks. And the game continually rewards you for doing that, and also will increase proc chance on your weapon. I've actually not found out exactly what the procs are on the weapons that I'm using, except that they seem to have some sort of proc, and the more that you kill in a chain, the higher the proc chance will get for that particular weapon. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. I feel that the game is really solid for what it is, and that is a 3-player co-op twin-stick game. It is a hell of a lot more fun in co-op, and yes, all games are when you play with friends, but I'm finding that because of the synergies between the 3 different robot frames that you have available, especially on the harder difficulty, it's a lot more fun to play with other people. As the Vanguard, I have some tanking ability, so if a bunch of enemies come in and they start trying to kill us with ranged attacks, I'll be able to deflect those. There's even an upgrade I can get which will reflect the shots back at the opponent, which I thought was pretty cool. And, of course, there is a healer and support class, so you can definitely work together. And you don't necessarily need to play with friends either. The game has quick play matchmaking, and it's a fairly simple game to get the hang of, so you don't really need to have everybody on voice over IP and talking in order to actually beat it. The hardest difficulty is the one that I found the most enjoyable, because they didn't turn the enemies into bullet sponges. They decided to make the enemies just as fragile, but they just upped the damage across the board. So you really have to avoid incoming attacks. And most enemies do telegraph, so that's not something that's going to kill you without warning. You have space, which allows you to dodge there. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I do have that shield ability that I can use to deflect enemy shots. So you have mitigation, you know, and if you get hit, it's generally your fault. Although occasionally it can be easy to get overwhelmed by a large number of enemies. But again, it was your fault. It doesn't feel like the game is particularly cheap in the vast majority of circumstances, with the exception of those nasty little suicide robots that will occasionally pop up and eliminate you there. So what you've got is a really solid but fairly unremarkable co-op twin-stick shooter that has a fairly strong melee element as well if you happen to want to play the melee-based frame, which I do, and I've got an awful lot of satisfaction out of so far. If you've got 3 people to play it with, especially on the harder difficulty, you'll probably have a pretty good time with it. But the one thing that I will say about it is that the game feels distinctly average. Now, average has almost become an insult. It's almost become a real negative when looking at games these days. If someone says, oh, well, this game is average, a lot of people seem to interpret that as, well, it's not worth my time then. No, that's not really true. You know, when we talk about a truly average game, we're not talking about a bad game. We're just not talking about a game that is exceptional, you know. It's good at what it does. It's just what it does is wholly unoriginal. It feels like there was a lot of potential to make a very special game out of it, because the basic mechanics and the combat system, as well as the look of the game, the aesthetic, they're all good. You know, nice little selection of weapons, really nice combat that feels like it's got real impact to it, and awesome player feedback. Although the screen can definitely get a little bit busy with particle effects, and there's this incredibly annoying artifacting effect that happens when you take too much damage. It reminds me actually of Kane and Lynch 2 Dog Days. At the time, I think it was actually praised for the use of that, saying, oh, it almost looks like a distorted YouTube video. Well, I've seen a few too many games do that lately, and I am now, as a result, less impressed by it, and I find it to be somewhat obnoxious. But other than that, you know, it's a pretty good-looking game with some nice particle effects, some really well-put-together animations. But it is inescapably a run-of-the-mill twin-stick shooter with 3-player co-op. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe that's all you were looking for. Just a really solid twin-stick shooter with very functional 3-player co-op, a nice synergy between the 3 available characters. And that's what it is. It provides that. It absolutely does. It is not a bad game by any means. I'm just a little disappointed that it's not an incredible game, that I feel that it absolutely could have been if they'd tweaked certain things about it, or if maybe they'd added a loot drop system or made the upgrades a little bit more interesting rather than just straight up stat upgrades. The story is relatively forgettable in the 3 hours or so that I've played it, but there are a few audio logs scattered around the place, and I do like the fact that each of the enemies actually has a little bit of lore backing it up that you can read in the data logs outside of the game. So they're trying to flesh out a universe in which humans have been obliterated, and it's not an original idea, but they at least made an effort to actually create a universe that has some sort of background lore and to build an actual world rather than just completely forgetting that. It's not an exceptional game, but I think the price is right. You're looking at a $20 co-op twin stick. The multiplayer seems to work very well. I've played the game almost exclusively in multiplayer with both friends and randoms. There don't seem to be any latency issues. I've had no connectivity issues at all. Nobody's dropped or crashed. It seems pretty much rock solid, and finding a game is not difficult. You know, it's actually very easy to do. I was able to drop in and drop out very, very easily. And at the end of every level, you can go and customize, and if you've earned any new abilities, such as I have right now, I'll be able to jump out of the game into the lobby, and then I can customize my frame with that. So let me show you a little bit of that. I'm gonna jump out of this session with the random players that I found right now. There we go. So if I go to the machine lab, I can tweak my current chassis, which is this one right here, currently at level 14. There we go. And I believe I have to start a game. At least I think I do. You can see the 3 different chassis available right there, and that's the progression. I think you can go all the way up to level 30, so that's when all of the unlocks are available right at the end there. If I start a game, we'll just go for the campaign mode. There we go. Just select one of these. And we're just going to do this offline, and you can see my giant robot there. Now, there's a bit of visual customization in the form of so-called firmware. Basically, it's different hats and capes and things like that, so you can mess around a little bit with the customization. I unlocked a different armor color there, which looks kind of cool. Any game with capes in it gets an additional point in my book. There you go. You have your primary weapon, so these are the gauntlets. Well, that's certainly what they sound like. That's the anvil, a giant hammer. And you can see a little bit about the different characteristics of it, but again, I would like to know exactly what these weapons do in terms of their procs, because I've seen them proc before. I just don't know why they did. You know, I've seen no real description of it in that respect, but these weapons have a primary attack and a charged attack as well, which are a little bit varied, and also you have the ability to charge forward. There's a couple of different ranged weapons, and you can also get launchers as well for this particular character. And as I said, all these can be very easily upgraded. If I want to upgrade the anvil, there we go. There's the upgrade. And that's all it does. You know, it's just a shame that the upgrade system wasn't more fleshed out and gave you actual real choices to make. And these are the functions. So these are your abilities, and I've got it set up now so that my shield will actually stun people that collide with it, and so on and so forth. And, you know, there's a couple of different abilities that you can pick between as well. So, my conclusion on Livelock, it's not remarkable. But what it does well. And for its price, it's hard to argue, especially if you intend to play it with a couple of friends. I would recommend playing it on hard mode because I didn't find normal to be particularly challenging. There's really not a death penalty in the game. Outside of losing your score multiplier, you can pretty much respawn as much as you want. There are a couple of levels where it is possible to fail completely. Usually they're escort missions. Outside of that, though, you can keep respawning to your heart's content. So playing harder mode will give you a bit of challenge, and it really does accentuate and bring to the fore the synergy between the 3 different kinds of chassis, and that enables you to work together and give you satisfying co-op. Rather than just simply hacking and slashing your way through with other people, you're actually genuinely working together to help each other out. It's not going to be winning any awards. It's not going to be setting the world on fire. It's not going to be generating articles about this game's innovation. Not at all. But it's solid. And solid is often enough for $20. You know, I think you'll get your money's worth with it if you're looking for a simple 3-player co-op twin stick / hack and slash experience. I do hope they add some more chassis into the game and maybe expand it, maybe add a loot system or something like that. I think that would really help the replayability of it. I am a little concerned about that. I believe the game has 21 missions. Once you beat them, really the only thing to do is score attack or play the endless so-called open protocol mode, which is basically just a wave-based survival mode, which I don't really find too much value in that. But for a playthrough or two, for $20, yeah, sure, why not? You know, there's not much wrong with Livelock. It's just whenever there's a game where I feel everything's really solid and yet unremarkable, I always think, wow, if there was just a spark there was just that one feature that really made it stand out from the pack, this would actually be considered not just an average game, but an excellent game. But what it does well. And you can't really complain too much about that. It's not trying to be more than it is. I just kind of wish that it was. It's fun, though. You know, it's pretty solid. Livelock, ladies and gentlemen. $20 or your regional equivalent. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, by all means, do feel free to click the like button. If not, the dislike button is right over there. And I'll see you next time.